The opposition leader will deliver his budget reply speech within hours as the Prime Minister prepares to drive to the Governor-General's house and officially call an election. I'm Patricia Karvelas, live from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in Canberra. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the election will be called pretty imminently, with Labor sources telling the ABC he will likely go to the Governor-General's house tomorrow. The official account of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet also mistakenly posted to social media saying caretaker conventions had been activated, something that only happens once the election is called. The opposition has pledged to cut the fuel excise by 25 cents for 12 months if they win government at the election. Peter Dutton says their policy would take effect as soon as the coalition wins office, in contrast to Labor's new tax cuts, which go into effect next year. What policy will voters back? I'll ask my panel, Anne Aly and Barnaby Joyce. US President Donald Trump has announced 25% tariffs on all automotive imports to the United States. It comes days before Trump is set to unveil wide-ranging reciprocal tariffs on other goods from around the world. Will this filter down to Australian car prices? I'll ask the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Well, we're just hours away from the opposition leader's budget reply speech, where we will finally hear some of their major election policies. The Prime Minister says the election will be called pretty imminently, so this is set to be the last pre-campaign showpiece. Now, as we mentioned in our headlines, the opposition has announced they will take a 12-month cut to the fuel excise to the election. Opposition leader Peter Dutton says the cost of living relief is more immediate than the government's tax cuts.
It's an either-or option, which can't pretend that we've got endless amounts of money, and we took a decision that giving the fuel tax cut now to families straight away is a better option than providing 70 cents a day in 15 months' time.
Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor clarified this further on AM this morning, confirming the coalition would repeal the government's tax cuts.
This will replace what Labor is doing, which we think is inappropriate under the circumstances, as we've laid out in the last 24 hours.
So the party of lower taxes would...
Well, this is a lower tax.
But to be clear, you would repeal it?
We absolutely would repeal it.
To respond to that, let's bring in the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. Treasurer, welcome.
Thanks very much, Patricia.
I just want to be crystal clear and clarify your position. Are you opposed to the opposition's fuel excise cut?
We've got our own plan for the cost of living, and what Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor haven't mentioned today is that the tax cuts are an important part of our cost of living relief, but not the only part. Cheaper medicines, cutting student debt, energy bill rebates, strengthening Medicare, because more bulk billing means less pressure on families. And so we've got a combination, a package of cost of living assistance, and we've already laid it out in the budget.
Just to be clear though, why didn't you match the petrol cut announcement? I mean, they've done that with your health plans, clearly a vulnerability for them, it's quite obvious, so they've matched all of those plans. Why didn't you make the same decision?
Because we've already got better plans on the cost of living. And the most important part of all of this is Angus Taylor told Sabra Lane on the ABC this morning that he would legislate to increase taxes on every Australian taxpayer if they win the election. And no matter what Peter Dutton says in a couple of hours' time, that has been rendered almost meaningless by the fact that the coalition has confirmed every taxpayer will pay more tax if the coalition wins the election. Australians will earn less and keep less of what they earn if Peter Dutton wins the election, and that proves beyond any doubt that Australians would be worse off under Peter Dutton.
The coalition say their policy is immediate, it does start earlier, and that it's higher relief for households, that they actually end up saving more money. So isn't that right?
Of course it's not. I mean, they have no ongoing cost of living help for Australians.
Sure, it's 12 months,
None.
That's right.
They have no ongoing...
For 12 months, people get a better deal?
No, because we've got a broader package of cost of living relief, which I've just run through for you. But it's a very important point. They have no ongoing relief when it comes to the cost of living, and they would increase taxes. What they are saying today, no matter what Peter Dutton tries to say today with this 30-minute scripted speech that he gets the opportunity to give, the coalition is about three things: higher taxes for every worker, secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors, and no ongoing cost of living relief. That's what they're on about. That's the difference.
They've actually backed in some of your cost of living relief, though. The energy rebate, they've said they'll do, as I say, cheaper medicines, they've said yes to. They said yes to more bulk billing for Medicare. So they actually have said yes to a lot of the things that you've mentioned.
But they have said, both Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor have said that the best predictor of what they'd be like in government is their past performance. When Peter Dutton was the health minister, he tried to gut Medicare. You know, they voted against our energy bill relief earlier in the term. You know, cost of living assistance and the tax cuts are not safe from Peter Dutton and the coalition, and that means Australians will be worse off if they win the election.
Voters in outer suburban and regional areas are expected to be, if you look at how this works, the biggest beneficiaries. And the NRMA spokesman, Peter Curry, also said that they're the ones that will be the ones that benefit. So, in a sense, is Peter Dutton's plan more targeted at some of those voters in the outer suburbs that he's been trying to reach?
Well, I mean, no doubt he's trying to play a political game. That's all he knows and all he does. Every single taxpayer in the suburbs of this country will pay more tax if Peter Dutton wins the election. You know, that's what this election really boils down to. It will be a referendum on Medicare, but it will also be a very simple choice. We've got Labor and Anthony Albanese cutting taxes for every taxpayer and helping with the cost of living, versus Peter Dutton and the coalition jacking up taxes for every taxpayer and making people worse off.
The tax cut, because you went so broad, might you lose any potential benefit that people feel because it's so broad, therefore not very large?
Well, there is a tax cut for every taxpayer. In fact, 2 more tax cuts to top up the tax relief that's already flowing in the economy. The combined benefit is about $50 a week when it comes to the average tax cut. 3 tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer. But disproportionately benefits people on lower incomes. It disproportionately benefits women, younger workers and people entering the workforce as a proportion of their income, and that's deliberate.
Okay. The budget on other issues, there wasn't much in the housing space. There was, I think, prefab housing. There was a bit, but there wasn't much extra. You don't have much in the contingency for more election promises, as far as I can see, either. So are you going to the election with just the current housing policies you have, or might there be more?
Well, obviously, between now and election day, you know, all of the participants in the election will make more announcements, and we'll be no different. But we'll be taking to the election a $33 billion housing plan, and the 4 new elements in the budget on Tuesday night were funding the announcements we've made on extending Help to Buy, the prefab, modern methods of construction piece, very important, the changes, the crackdown on foreign purchases of land, and also the incentive payments for apprentices in the building industries. And in all 4 of our budgets, we've made new investments in housing. That $33 billion investment is historic because we know if we're going to build these 1.2 million homes that we need over the next 5 years, everybody needs to play their part, and we've shown a real willingness to do our bit.
Net overseas migration is now forecast to be 335,000 in 24-25, right? That's, I think, about 75,000 higher than what was forecast. Are you concerned about that number?
So that's the year that we're finishing now, and the main driver of that is actually fewer people leaving. It's not the forecasts for people coming here have been broadly as expected.
But they won't leave.
Well, it's not just; it's also Australians leaving. You know, it's a net. Obviously, the net part of the net overseas migration is key.
Australians like it better here.
Yeah, and why not?
Fair enough.
And why not? And so that's what's driven that change. But what you can see in the budget forecast is we are managing net overseas migration down quite considerably from that post-COVID spike. Some of that is automatic. The post-COVID spike is trailing away, but also some of the steps that we have taken and are taking to get that down to more manageable levels.
Okay. Forecasts haven't been accurate to date. They've been higher every time it's been reported. Clearly, the coalition plans to campaign pretty hard on immigration numbers, how many people came in, the spike. And I do Q&A as well, as you know. Overwhelmingly, we get questions about immigration. I've been shocked at actually just how much the community is concerned. With the benefit of hindsight over this term, do you think Labor should have done more to kind of control that high level as it came in? Well,
we are managing it down in a considered and methodical way. You know, Peter Dutton, and tonight will be no different. He always tries to play divisive politics about migration. We'll see that again tonight, I'm pretty sure of that. We're managing it down. Now, Our political opponents have made announcements and walked them back. Angus Taylor went to the press club and got it horribly wrong. They didn't understand the difference between net overseas migration, the permanent program, and so they've made a mess of it. No doubt they'll try and clean that up tonight. But our job as a government is to manage these numbers down in a considered and methodical way, and that's what's been happening.
But you acknowledge that in the community this has been a red-hot issue?
I do. I do. And part of that's been kind of whipped up deliberately by our political opponents. I think the best way to make migration policy is calmly, in a considered way. That's what we've been doing, and as a consequence of our efforts, we've seen the numbers come down substantially.
I just want to talk to you about the public servant numbers, right? It was 36,000 in your last budget update, it was 41. Why did you need to even put more public servants on?
Well, there's been good reasons for that. I'll give you two examples. First example is Katie Gallagher's been doing this amazing work, converting people who are contractors and consultants, often more expensive than public servants, into permanent public servants. That's been deliberate. We actually get better value for money from that. That's a very key reason. And I'll give you another example. And when we came to office, there were 42,000 veterans who had their claims were just sitting in the inbox. And that's shameful. In a country like ours, we want to make sure that veterans are getting the support that they need and deserve, often after a lifetime of service. And so some of the extra public servants that we put on have been to get through that backlog. We've eliminated that backlog. We've got billions of dollars of payments out to veterans, and we're proud that we have.
I just want to ask you something about the role of influencers in the budget, right? What was that all about?
Well, I think a lot of people get their media and their information from a broader range of sources now. And, we make sure that we, are attentive to traditional sources of media, but we can't pretend that everybody gets their media from the same places they may have when we started knocking around this building, Patricia, 20 years ago or something.
Or something.
Or something. I'm rounding up. And so that just recognises that, we engage enthusiastically with people who share news with the broader community. We're proud of the budget. We want people to know all about it. So we engage with the traditional media, we engage with social media influencers, and I think that's appropriate. Yeah,
I mean, the Trump administration has gone down this road too, but there are seats now that are being taken by influencers and people who are quite partisan players rather than independent media. How important do you think it is to still give the front row seats, so to speak, to the journalists, for accountability? Because, yes, I agree with you, the world's changing, but equally we need accountability in this country.
Yeah, of course, and we're not... new media players are not participating at the expense of traditional sources of media. It's in addition to. And I know that there's been a lot of commentary about it, a lot of interest in it. And to be honest with you, it takes a bit of adapting as a senior cabinet minister in the government. I did the Batuta Advocate interview yesterday.
How'd that go for you? I'm enjoying this more though.
I'll leave that for others to judge.
I am funny.
You are. And so the media landscape's changing and we have to change with it.
Yeah. Now, I did say at the beginning of the program that I was going to ask you about Trump's latest tariffs, so I will. Trump has announced these 25% tariffs on auto imports today. We obviously no longer make cars, famously. Do you anticipate this doing anything to our car prices if this happens?
Well, the tariffs that President Trump announced today, as I understand them, are about finished cars, and we don't make finished cars in Australia anymore. We still have a role to play in the components business. And so we're working through this announcement and trying to understand any implications for Australia. I think we've made it clear more broadly that when it comes to these escalating trade tensions around the world, we'll continue to speak up for and stand up for Australia's national interest. But when it comes to that specific announcement, my colleagues are working through that to see what it means for us.
So I want to ask this tricky question now. The Prime Minister says the election is imminent.
It is imminent, yeah.
Imminent.
Yeah.
So... usually you leave on a Thursday night, don't you?
Not when it's budget reply night.
OK, so you're going to be in Canberra all day tomorrow?
I'll be in Canberra tomorrow morning because there's a budget reply tonight.
And then you have to respond traditionally and then you're just going to be hanging around?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister said, and I said earlier in another interview, the election's going to be in May. And we are at the end of March now, and so I don't think it should come as a big surprise to anyone that the Prime Minister will call the election pretty soon. Yeah, no, not shocking or surprising. Thank you, Treasurer, for always being generous with your time. I appreciate it, Patricia. Thank you.
Now, to talk about everything else that's happening in the world around us, we're going to talk to David Spears in a moment. But the last question time of the term drew the election battle lines very clearly today, with the opposition lobbying its proposed cut to the fuel excise against the government's tax cuts. The government accusing the coalition of wanting to jack up taxes by repealing their changes. Proceedings in the lower house kicked off with this exchange this afternoon.
Will the Prime Minister join with me in cutting the price of petrol and diesel to save tradies, pensioners and families up to $28 a week instead of his 70-cent a day tax cut, which doesn't even come in for 15 months?
I wonder if he gave that speech or that question when he was sitting in the cabinet room when indexation of petrol was reintroduced in the 2014 budget. This morning have declared they are the first opposition to ever say, if you elect us to government, we will increase the taxes for every single taxpayer. Every single taxpayer will pay more tax if they are elected at the election in May.
So it is definitely the last day of this parliament. We can say that with certainty, although I did say that to you once before. It seems to me that this one is definitely the last day. Let's bring in Insider's host and national political lead, David Spears. David?
Hey, PK.
We can say that with certainty.
Definitely the last day of Parliament of the term. And therefore, I was sitting in the chamber watching Question Time this afternoon. Some of the political heavyweights of years gone by, like Linda Burney and so on, their last day in the chamber. Perhaps a few nervous MPs wondering if this was their last day. Should they lose their seat at the coming election? But yes, whether the election is called tomorrow morning or over the weekend, or does he wait another week? Look, the almost unbackable favourite is that he calls it tomorrow morning, but look, we'll know. Yeah, we'll know this time tomorrow.
Of course, and we're having an election in May. It's true. Yep. It's on. So, David, this is a really unusual. The battle lines are really odd. We've got the Labor Treasurer just in here telling me that the coalition wants to jack up taxes, that they want to do this, the taxes will be higher under the coalition. And he's right, because they said it. They said they were going to repeal the tax cuts that are now legislated. Yeah,
and look, this is an unusual, perhaps unprecedented situation for the Conservative side of politics, who normally are the party of lower taxes, or say they're the party of lower taxes, to be opposing a tax, but as you say, what's more, saying we'll go to the election promising to repeal that tax cut, i.e. introduce legislation to Parliament to put up taxes. Now, look, Peter Dutton clearly is confident that it's such a small tax cut, this doesn't matter. And his fuel excise offering that we'll hear from tonight, and they put out there today to get at least a day's coverage before an election is no doubt called, that offsets any damage done. But it is a big call. And I think if things don't go well for the coalition in this election, we'll look back on this call. I wrote about this today. I think there have been a few big calls for Peter Dutton in this term, The Voice, the stage 3 tax cuts, nuclear power, and this is up there with them because it's not typical for a Liberal leader to say no to a tax cut. He's backed a lot of other spending measures on health, on the electricity rebate and so on, but this one he's drawn a line and said no. But to say we'll put up that tax, look, it ends up with a hip pocket auction in this campaign for voters. For all that we've focused on in terms of policy debates over the last few years, it comes down to a pretty raw offering, the small tax cut that will continue but doesn't kick in for another 15 months, or an immediate fuel excise cut that will last for only 12 months. So what are voters going to choose? We'll see. But yeah, there's nothing really there about budget repair in these policies or productivity enhancing reform in these policies. They are pretty flat out election sweeteners. Oh,
so much so, right? I mean, the only difference, I think, is that the Labor policy is built into our tax system then and returns bracket creep. That's one definitive element.
Yeah, well, it pushes out bracket creep for 2 years at least, according to the budget papers. But then, bracket creep will, as it always does,
it comes back unless you index it to inflation.
And they're not doing that.
No.
But look, yes, philosophically, I think for the coalition. When I rang around some of them before the announcement today on the fuel excise cut, a lot of them were uncomfortable about going to an election saying that they would put up taxes, but that's essentially where they've landed today. They are going to put up or repeal this small tax cut. So, yeah, it is, and you could see Labor having a lot of fun with that today. Jim Chalmers just now, but in Parliament, I mean, Anthony Albanese had a line that Labor, we're the party of lower taxes, and you could hear the roar from the other side. But this has allowed them to do that, to say you're the ones who want to jack up taxes, we're for lower taxes. So
definitely a risky move, but Peter Dutton has put all his eggs in the basket of the sweetness of getting it quicker.
Yeah, that, and look, I'd say, yes, he obviously hopes the fuel excise cut gives him an answer on the tax cut front. But he will also tonight put money into defence spending, higher defence spending. And his calculation here is that with, you know, the most precarious time since World War II, as both sides tell us that we're in, and we no doubt are, and particularly after, you know, concerns have been growing about the reliability of the US under Donald Trump, that voters will see that the responsible course here is to put at least some more money into defence. And that's what he will announce tonight. Now, whether that's going to be a vote winner for him, I don't know. I don't doubt there's been a shift in voter sentiment on the need for more defence spending, but enough to actually acknowledge that, yep, let's lift defence spending is a good idea rather than putting as much money as we are into a tax cut. The other big thing we'll hear tonight from Peter Dutton is going to be on gas. Now, I don't know the details, but something to get more gas into the system to help bring down energy prices.
Gas reservation.
Yeah, I mean, look, none of these are easy, quick fixes. No. You know, your options would be some sort of gas reservation, but that would be for new projects.
So again, into
we've already contracted, yeah, or you build a connecting pipeline from the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territory down to New South Wales. Again, that takes time and money to do. So there's no easy, quick fix. Maybe he's found a way to squeeze more gas out of current projects. We'll see tonight, but they're going to be the big ones that he's got. Gas, obviously today's fuel excise cut, and the defence spending.
So the election is upon us, David. I couldn't imagine spending it with anyone better than you. Thank you.
Thanks, BK.
The new Air Force chief says he is very comfortable with the Australian military's response to Chinese warships, which circumnavigated the Australian coast earlier this month. Defence correspondent Andrew Green spoke exclusively to Air Marshal Stephen Chappell this week in his first interview in the top job. He's just a part of that interview.
We are in a period of strategic autumn, is the way I would describe it, and our job with the rest of our ADF and defence colleagues, our interagency colleagues, and with our allies and partners and industry partners is to ultimately deter in the minds of those who might make decisions, those decisions that would push us from autumn into winter.
I want to take you to your term of strategic autumn. What did we learn from the arrival of the PLA task force in Australia?
But what I would say as the Chief of Air Force is I'm very comfortable with both where Air Force is and where it was, and where our whole of defence structures and postures were around that task group. More broadly speaking, very, very comfortable that we have the capabilities, we have the capacity, and that we would have all of the option sets available to us to maintain that in this phase of history.
Was the Triton available for the response to that task force? And if not, how soon could we have had that platform up there?
It has flown in both February and March and is on track in its effectively its testing phase before we introduce it to service. So I'm again very comfortable with where Triton is and what it will provide, but it was not required for that task group.
On the Joint Strike Fighter, there have been all sorts of suggestions that the President of the US has a kill switch. Is it a problem that the United States, we are so dependent on that country for updates and upgrades to that platform?
We are well aligned and we are very comfortable with a strong relationship, and that our nation's interests and the US interests very much are the same, and the challenges we face are the same here in the Indo-Pacific.
Finally, Air Marshal, we've seen the unveiling of the F-47. Can I get your initial reactions? And many years down the track, could you see Australia flying it?
Well, we'll see, Andrew, but my initial impressions, again, it'll be a wonderful, amazing capability, I have no doubt. You know, the US 5th gen fleet is an incredibly impressive fleet, and we are very, very excited about the fact that we operate some of that fleet with the F-35. I was very fortunate to be on exchange back in the early mid-2000s with the US Air Force, and I was actually involved in the final phases of F-22 tactical test and evaluation at Nellis Air Force Base. It was eye-watering, the level of capability from what it was we were operating in 4th Gen. I can only imagine that the same eye-watering evolution will have occurred with the 6th Gen F-47. So looking forward to knowing more about it in due course. And again, it's numbered after a fantastic fighter from World War II.
Air Marshal Stephen Chappell, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Well, last day of Parliament. I think tomorrow we might have an election called. Makes it make a lot of sense to have a political panel this afternoon. Early Childhood Education Minister Anne Aly joins us, and Nationals frontbencher Barnaby Joyce. Welcome to both of you.
PK, how are you?
Excited to have you both in the room with me. So Barnaby Joyce, it is an exciting time for democracy and life itself.
That's a great thing about our nation, PK.
It is wonderful, and we all agree on that. Now, the opposition is saying that you have previously said, not the opposition, the government rather, faux pas.
Thank you for that.
Not a Freudian.
That you've previously said that the fuel excise is just cuts to the fuel excise is not good. Money should go to roads. I mean, you have said it before, so it must be a thought you have.
Well, I think it's really important that we understand the efficacy of what we do to try and help people in a cost of living crisis. Now, we can suggest that in half a year's time you're going to give them, I don't know, 75 cents, 80 cents a day, or you can say to them straight away, remember, those who hurt the most in fuel are the poorest, because in regional areas, they live the furthest away from the resources, such as the public services, such as your schools, such as your hospitals, such as groceries. They're the people for which fuel is a greater proportion of their budget. They are people who have probably the less economical cars. So for me to look after people in basically a cost of living crisis which is just crushing people, this is the most efficacious way to deal with it.
Okay, but you previously thought it was a bad idea.
But this is what we're dealing with right now. In the past, power bills were much lower than what they are now, and now our power bills are higher. The jihad for intermittence and the great God Gaia chasing for 82% intermittence by 2030 hadn't really bitten the way it's biting now, and now we have people who are poor getting poorer and getting kicked out of their house, and this is a very efficacious way to get money back to them.
Anne Aly, you've heard the argument there. Your alternative is tax cuts that don't start till after their proposal for this fuel excise cut. But it is a smaller amount of money people end up with. So why not back in the fuel excise cut?
Okay, so just going back to the point that Barnaby made, Barnaby, you actually flat out said that it would not help the cost of living back then. If it wasn't going to help the cost of living back in 2022, I find it quite confusing that you are now mounting an argument that it would help the cost of living
that
now.
was 3 years ago.
But just on people who were doing it tough 3 years ago
doing
are
it
still
tough
doing
now.
it tough today.
Boy, they're doing it tough now.
Let me just make that point. On the fuel excise, I think what's really telling is that Angus Taylor really said the quiet bit out loud when he said that this is temporary compared to our permanent tax cuts. Now, the tax cuts that we're putting forward are a second tranche of tax cuts, building on the ones that we passed last year, I think it was, or the year before, and the ones that will come after that. Now, when you add up those cumulative tax cuts, it's actually around $50 a week on average. And if you add on to that the other things that we've done on bringing down the costs of medicine and healthcare, guaranteeing the Medicare that people can see a doctor for free, childcare costs, parental leave, all of the things that we've done for cost of living measures. Honestly, if you think that $50 plus all the other cost of living measures a week is not helping cost of living, then you are seriously out of touch.
I'm happy to address. I'm happy to address that.
Very briefly.
Let's look at the people who it probably hurts the most, like people like pensioners, people like single mothers, people who are struggling having a job. You will find in many instances they don't pay tax, so they don't get a tax break.
I was a single mum who paid tax.
Not even a well, aren't you lucky? Because they've got a lot of my
minimum wage.
In 70 cents doesn't help them. So what they do have to pay, what they can't get out of, is their fuel bill. They can't get out of that. So this is a way that we actually can help those who really are doing it tough.
Okay.
I'm not doing it tough, you're not doing it tough, you're not doing it tough, but by gosh, there are people out there who are.
No one is contesting here that people are doing it tough. That's one thing we all agree on, right? It's about the remedies.
That's right, absolutely.
Everyone is doing it tough. Barnaby Joyce, are you comfortable with your, broader ideas about what you think about taxation to come back into this parliament if you're elected and to repeal the tax cut that's just been legislated?
Well, I am when we have things such as a capacity to put more money back in the pockets of those who we have a role in compassion to help those who are doing it the toughest, who are hurting the most, who are living the hardest lives. Now that allows the most immediate way you can do that is with a reduction in fuel excise. That's the most immediate way. And we have put up a reduction in fuel excise, and obviously we can't just say, well, we're just going to throw all forms of sort of fiduciary care out the window.
Don't people in the middle...
Remember, we are not the government that took this debt over $1 trillion. That is the Labor Party.
So don't people who have been, paying higher tax because of bracket creep deserve some of that back, even if you can...
Yeah, we've supported stage 1, stage 2 tax cuts. We actually were the part of the process of making sure people got more of their money back. It's somehow people sort of deny the fact that we actually supported tax cuts. But this doesn't mean that every sort of... idea of a government that took us to $1 trillion in debt has to be complied with.
Do you accept, though, that taking to the election that you would then go and repeal this is contentious, is unusual?
Well, the other things we are now in a position with $1 trillion in debt. We never had that. Now we're going to get it under the Labor Party. No, we never had it. You can go to AGS Outstanding and get a pretty good understanding. AOFM for the people out there, you can go Google it, have a look. Now, that is once $1 trillion in seconds, that'd be like 31,700 years.
That wasn't my question.
And we have to try and work out how we start paying that back, or at least holding it still, because those budget papers we received say there's only one direction this debt is going.
Why should individual
Because you can't just come up with every,
you could do different tax reform to pay for things.
Improper ideas of this sort of glitchy little 70 cents, and because they put it out there as some sort of little tricky, sneaky thing that has no effect.
Sneaky? It's just
I think so, because, honestly, are you going to be looking forward to 75 cents a day?
I don't know if I'm the target.
No,
that's
right. I just want to come in.
I don't reckon the policy's for me.
I just want to come in here, if I may, because Barnaby, what you have just done is confirm once again that the Liberals will tax Australians more. That's what you've just confirmed. That tax will go up under a Liberal leadership. You've got a fuel excise, which, by the way, when the Liberals voted against every single one of our cost of living measures, threw in words like sugar hit, threw in words like, short term, threw in words like a 5-week budget, and are now offering a temporary fuel excise measure, whilst at the same time saying, we're going to tax you more. You've just confirmed that you will tax Australians more. Well, that means that Australians, come the election, have a choice for a party that openly and proudly, as you have just done, states that they will tax you more, versus a party that is giving you 3 tax cuts.
Well, they have a choice. They have a choice between the Labor Party, that has put their power prices through the roof and made them poorer, that has inflicted the power prices onto their cost of living through their groceries, making them poorer, that has taken debt through $1 trillion, and then we have to somehow give them some warrant that economically they know what they're doing. It's been a basket case.
Can I challenge that, please, if I may?
Sure,
because there was a report that came out today, and this was done by the ANU Centre for Social Research and Methods.
That sounds reasonable.
And that said that 2/3 of Australians, led by single parents, you mentioned single mums, and middle-income families, have gained up to $2,500 through tax cuts, childcare, and parental leave since the Albanese government came to office. That was what was revealed today.
Okay. Well, let's go through that report.
By every measure, sorry, Barnaby, if I may, by every measure, and this is not the only analysis that has come out, there are several analyses that have come out that have demonstrated how much better off average Australians, and in this
Dr.
case,
Anne Aly, I know that you're very competent, but I think I do have a right to reply on that. In that report, can you now please refer me to the part where they say how much their power bill has gone up by?
Barnaby, you can read the report.
No. I think
you can read the report.
to get a wholesome understanding.
I'm quoting here from a newspaper article
tell us
today.
Exactly.
$2,500.
But how much does a power bill go up by?
Single mum.
Why don't they put that in the report?
Families,
or are we being very selective in what you're reading?
Talking one at a time.
Well, you can't just read out a section of a report and say, we'll leave out the bad bit and just read out this bit.
I think, though, the contest is cost of living has been extremely high. And you know that too. Even in saying that,
100% agree
these people may be better off, as you might argue, based on the things that you've offered. But that's a low base. They haven't been living large.
100% agree with you. Nobody is saying things are hunky-dory, let's all celebrate. What we are saying, as the Treasurer has said, this is a soft landing. We know things are bad, and we've got more work on. We've got more work to do. And in our second term, the second term that we're seeking, we are offering on the table real, tangible cost of living relief that is permanent and ongoing.
This idea that this is a soft landing, that is such an insult to so many people out there. If you went out to people in the regional towns, even into the suburban areas, go to their checkout and go, how are you enjoying your soft landing under Minister Bowen?
Like I said,
do you think they'll be saying, this is a soft landing? I can't afford my rent, that's a soft landing. I've been kicked out, I'm living in a car, that's a soft landing. I can't afford my power bill, what a soft landing. I mean, it's an insult. And it just shows a complete ignorance to the realities of so many people's lives out there.
Well, I suppose the election is ultimately a contest of what people make a decision about going forward, right?
Exactly.
Right, but, Anne Aly, it is in some ways a referendum on the government's last 3 years as well, because
every election
you're asking for another term. So,
That's right.
and you know people are red hot with rage.
Look, every election is the government going out there and seeking another term based on what they've done and based on what the plan is for the future. We have articulated policies to continue building on what we've done to ease the cost of living and policies to continue building on that. What have the coalition come up with? $600 billion nuclear fantasy, free lunches for the boss. And
tonight is obviously the next opportunity. So let me ask the question.
It's a very binary thing, isn't it? I mean, seeing you saying what we've done, let's ask the question quite simply. Do people believe they are better off now than they were 3 years ago when you got your chance, the great honour of government? And overwhelmingly, people say, no, I'm vastly worse off. It's been a train wreck. And that's the experience that they'll be taking to the ballot box.
And I understand people are doing it tough. We have never denied that people are doing it tough.
You just told about soft landing.
But we do have a record. That was a soft landing
Where's a soft landing? And
a soft landing is at 6% inflation, down in the twos.
They're not having a soft landing. Why do you keep saying they're having a soft landing?
I'm not saying people
soft.
are having
it's
a soft
horrible.
landing. Oh my God, let me finish, please. Okay, what I'm saying to you is we're not saying it's hunky-dory. We know that people are doing it tough. We have had an agenda of cost of living relief. We have a further agenda of cost of living relief. We have put that forward to the Australian people in this budget and in
But
this policies that we've announced.
you have
compared
a greater
to
desire
dearth of
for
any
intermittent
policies,
power, a greater desire for intermittent
the
power
coalition
than really actually
and
helping
from
people.
Peter Dutton, who is seeking to be the next
You're more worried about the wind turbines.
Panel. I'm talking panel.
Thank you,
And
PK. Thank you, Mum.
Over to you, PK.
Let's breathe. Let's be our best.
Get your inner zen on. Get your inner zen on.
Thank you for giving us a vision of what the next 5 weeks are going to be.
Oh, you love it.
Oh my God, I hope not.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. But Barnaby Joyce, and I like debates. I think they're important.
Yeah.
Barnaby Joyce, tonight, Peter Dutton delivers his official reply. We know, obviously, this fuel excise cut. But does he need to actually establish a broader economic vision beyond a 12-month measure that helps some people about what you want to do in terms of reform?
Well, I believe that Peter will. I'm not privy to his speech, but for a gentleman that's been around here, 24, 25 years, like Mr. Albanese, he knows the political game. He's had a business. He's got a family. He understands. He's been a policeman and a father. So I think that what you'll get is a clear understanding of the tough decisions that need to be made to get our nation into a position where we can start dealing with the $1 trillion of debt that we have now been lumbered with, that we can start dealing with the cost of living issues that are before us, and there is no soft landing out there for those people. And I'll let him give his speech, and I'm happy to come on this program again, PK, and discuss with Anne and yourself.
Good. Okay, let's make it a day. And then we'll do this again. And final word to you. Today, actually, you made an announcement and you've talked about the childcare reforms that are still to come in the wake of that Four Corners story, which was very alarming, can I say. You've pledged to improve enforcement of the childcare sector and deal with bad actors. What are you going to do?
So there are 5 things that we're doing in that, and you're right. The Four Corners report was devastating. But there are 5 things that we're going to do. So the first one is ensuring that bad actors do not get approval for other services to open another service. Looking at bad actors, these are some of the most egregious breaches of child safety, can have their CCS removed. Ensuring that the Commonwealth regulator can do spot checks to check in on fraud and compliance. Ensuring that people who are service providers pay their workers correctly and on time. And the 5th one is looking across the entire care sector. If somebody is acting badly in early childhood education and care, they should not be able to shut that down and then open up an NDIS or any other government subsidised business. So these build on the child safety reforms that we are already working towards after our 2023 review, and demonstrate our commitment to child safety and quality in early childhood education and care.
We're out of time. Thank you.
Ditto.
Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Oh, very soon. Well, the Greens, for their part, do not support the Coalition's proposed cut to the fuel excise. The Environment spokesperson, Sarah Hanson-Young, described the policy as a bribe.
This is a 12-month sugar hit that is not really going to touch the sides of the permanent cost of living relief that Australians really need. And Peter Dutton's been out in the last few days, claiming that permanent tax cut that did pass the Parliament last night with the support of the Greens, that was a bribe. Well, I tell you what's a bribe: pretending to offer people cheaper petrol, which 12 months later is going to soar again, and failing to invest in allowing households to actually cut their bills permanently. That would mean electrifying their homes, helping them move to electric vehicles. They're cleaner, they're cheaper, they're more affordable. But of course, the other issue here, Emma, is both sides, both Labor and Liberal, are really failing to do the big things that are needed in this cost of living crisis.
Well, for more on this time from the crossbench, it's been a huge week of very different policies provided by both sides of politics. I want to bring in Independent Senator David Pocock. Welcome.
Hey, Patricia.
So we've got the tax cut, it's now been legislated, and the Coalition's alternative fuel excise cut, which does happen quicker, but it's 12 months and then it expires. Do you think there's merit in the fuel excise cut?
Happy to look at the detail. I'm concerned that we come to the budget and we're seeing sort of short-term tinkering, nothing that's actually addressing the root cause of the challenges that we're facing. Yes, there's a lot of people who I think will welcome any support, but Australians actually also want a vision for where we're going, and leaders who are going to say, we need to deal with these problems in a way that sets us up for the future. If you look at the energy bill relief, this Parliament would have spent $7 billion on energy bill relief. That could have helped 600,000 households electrify. They would then be saving thousands of dollars every single year. Like, these are the opportunities we're missing out on when we see this kind of short-term politicking for an election.
Right. You did help pass the tax cut that, of course, now is legislation, although it doesn't start, I think, for 15 months, or I think I've got that time frame right. Yeah. So if the Coalition were to win, they want to repeal it. That's what they've said. Well, Angus Taylor confirmed that this morning on ABC Radio. So would you give him your vote? Because he'd have to get it through the Senate to repeal the tax cut.
I mean, my commitment to people in the ACT, I'll take each piece of legislation on its merit. I get across that, I consult with experts, with people in the ACT, and then ultimately decide and vote on their behalf. So, I'll look at that every day as minority government in the Senate. When the major parties don't agree, the crossbench holds.
So you might help them repeal it?
I'd look at it. I've been critical of the $5 a week, which could have actually done something like raise the rate of job seeker to 90% of the age pension, which would be a total game changer in this country, would be a huge step forward for a country that has a social security system, which I think we should be really proud that we're a country that has one, but it leaves people in poverty. And over the last 3 years, I've pushed them, experts have pushed them, the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee has said this is the number one thing you can do for our country when it comes to dealing with inequality. And every time they've said, well, we can't afford that. 2 surpluses, and then when we have a deficit, they spend basically the exact same amount giving working Australians $5 a week in 15 months. That could have actually raised job seeker.
But if they are to repeal it, if they were to win, they want to repeal it so they could instead spend money on their fuel excise cut. Would that be something that you would be comfortable with?
Well, I'm, as a Territory Senator, on a 3-year term, so I'm up for re-election.
I've heard you're doing all right in the ACT. You feeling confident?
I haven't seen those polls. It's been
the vibes
it's a cliche,
of
but
Canberran friends.
It's been such a privilege to do this and represent a community I love and all these big issues. And I'll get across the detail, look at what it means. And again, I think one of the things that you've seen the crossbench push the government on, and the major parties, they're constantly talking about structural reform, fiscal responsibility, and then we get budgets like this that don't seem to have any structural reform. You talk about getting a bit more revenue from our gas exports. We give away half of them for free, and the major parties say, I couldn't possibly do that.
Okay.
We talk about housing and some sensible reforms to a system that forgoes billions in tax, and they say, we can't touch that. So let's have these sensible conversations.
I'm not sure if we're about to have them in the election campaign. We might have some of them.
I think a minority government may be the only way that we actually have these things. So most people I speak to
in your
want
dreams, would you like a minority government?
I think it would finally give the major parties some backbone to actually put Australians and our future ahead of vested interest and ahead of self-interest. We saw in electoral reform, they teamed up, self-interest won. And they're going to make it very hard in the future for minor parties' independence. And then time and again, when it comes to gas, to the environment. Yesterday I thought was an incredibly sad day for our parliament on the last day to wind back already weak environmental laws. That's vested interest right there. That's 3 multinationals in Tasmania that pay little tax on an issue that has really divided Tasmania. We've got to do better as a country.
It has divided Tasmania, I think, which is why, of course, I think the government was trying to appease people who are worried about their jobs. That's part of the division. Isn't that the conundrum for governments?
That's part of the conundrum, but at what cost? Are we making decisions like we want to be here for the long term, that we value species that have been here for 100 million years? T-Rex was running around and the Maugean skate was in Macquarie Harbour. And this decision, if you listen to science experts, will very likely send it towards extinction. And sitting in that Senate chamber when that vote was going down, it was a very sobering thing to realise that decision could be the extinction of a species that 100 million years, I can't get my head around that amount of time.
No, it's incredible. So you would like to see a gas reservation policy or something a little bit like that? The Coalition might be announcing something like that. Is it something you'd want to see policy on?
On Monday, I stood up with Senator Jackie Lambie, a bunch of stakeholders, fertiliser producers, manufacturers who are getting absolutely squeezed by the gas industry, being charged sometimes more than international prices for our own gas. The thing I'm saying is that there is 10 times more uncontracted gas. So gas that isn't on a long-term contract than our projected shortfall. So we don't actually need to enter the sovereign risk territory that the major parties tell us about. We could just say all uncontracted gas needs to be offered to Australians, manufacturers, businesses and Australian households first before it can then be sold. We don't need new gas. And so, I'm concerned that the Coalition and the gas industry are using this manufactured shortage in a country that exports 80% of our gas to say we need more gas at a time when climate scientists are saying use what we've got for the transition. We do not need more gas.
Just finally, and I talked to Anne Aly, who's the Minister responsible about childcare changes in the wake of that Four Corners. I know that you are really exercised about this too. What do you want to see change?
I actually met with Minister Aly this morning it's raising some concerns, and it's great to see the government acting. Clearly, there's some serious issues around governance and the regulatory environment, and you see this time and time again when something falls between states and territories and the federal government. Sometimes if it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility. So I think some of the reforms that they've announced are good, and we'll start to head towards a place where I think there is more accountability when you're getting government money and when you're looking after young people, our children.
You must be, now you've got a baby, you must have watched that Four Corners with a different lens.
It certainly, it does make it I guess more personal. I think long term we've got to start to talk about what is the long-term model for childcare. Should this be something that is available at schools, community centres? What does it actually look like? Obviously, our current model is private, community, a whole range of things. But I think it's a good conversation to have.
I think so too. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you. I know you're up for re-election, so let's see if we'll be talking more regardless.
I hope so. Thank you,
I think we
Patricia.
will be talking. I have a feeling. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A new report has shone a spotlight on child protection in Western Australia, finding Indigenous women are scared to seek help for fear their children will be taken. The report, produced by Human Rights Watch and the National Suicide Prevention and Trauma Recovery Project, interviewed 54 people over 2 years. It's called for an independent commissioner to oversee Aboriginal children in care. Marianne Headland McKay is the support coordinator for the NSPTRP, and a Noongar woman, and she joins me now. Welcome to the program.
Hey, how you going?
Good, thank you so much for joining us. This report is about the lived experience of Indigenous families and the child protection system in Western Australia. What did it find?
Well, basically it found that we had children being removed because we have parents that are going through domestic violence, AOD, housing issues. The thing that really captured me was the fact that we have parents being demonised by each of these child protective services right across the country, rather than providing stability. We have $8 billion right across the country being, funding child protective services, and yet only 17% of that actually goes towards, family support. In the 80s and 90s, it was all about providing stronger families, and keeping families together. And today, it's all about child protection and child removal. They talk about housing. A lot of the clients, the people that we interviewed, said that they had lost their children due to a lack of housing or homelessness. So we're calling for governments right across this country to release lands in each state and territory so that they can provide more public housing, because that is the biggest thing that people need in regards to stability. But they're so worried about property prices decreasing that it seems that the top end of town are more protected rather than keeping families together. And it's really, really disgusting, and it's really sad that we have families being torn apart because governments won't provide funding in regards to family support.
Just talk to me about what the women told you about their fear of seeking help because of their fear that their children will be taken.
Well, we have women, as soon as you look at the police officers to protect you, but as soon as the women call police when they're going through domestic violence, the police have a mandatory obligation to contact the Department of Child Protection and make a report. Now, we have got traumatised women. Some of these are vulnerable, some of them are in fear. There is not enough services to provide protection. There are not enough refuges for children and their mothers to be placed into. So you have women reaching out for support, and instead children are being removed because they're being told that they can't provide a safe environment for these children. And yet these women are reaching out. They're asking services. They're asking the Department of Child Protection for, a refuge, for, support to be able to keep their children. So they're actually reaching out, and when they're reaching out for support, they're being demonised while they're being traumatised, and they're not being provided the support that they're asking for. And this is why a lot of the women would either just run, or a lot of the women would go back to their partners.
Now, the report's also recommending establishing an independent commissioner to oversee Aboriginal children in care. Do you think that would make a big difference?
Well, I think so, because what is happening is the Department of Child Protection in WA have too much power. You can have people that make claims, and these could be malicious or vexatious claims, and you don't know who that person is that has made that claim against you. The children can be removed for something that's false, and you have no right to appeal that whole process and any of the claims because you don't receive the information. Your children are just taken. And so I think that, employing an independent commissioner that has oversight and is able to work with the families can actually work towards keeping the families together and monitoring the Department of Child Protection, because they are a power unto themselves. If they want to remove a child, they can remove a child. And one of the recommendations from the report actually states that there needs to be an interim order put into the magistrate in the court, and they make the decision whether the child is removed. But the magistrate can also say straight away, this is just for an interim, amount of time, and they work with the families to do whatever it is that they need to do to be reunified with that child automatically. And all of the recommendations that they've put together in the report need to be implemented in totality, not one, not two, the whole lot of them.
Now, of course, a lot of these issues are really acute in Western Australia, but this is something that happens all over the country. Would you like more national, federal involvement in some of these issues? I know that there is a really different approach taken by different states and territories.
Well, that's what we do need, because at the end of the day, these issues, you could speak to anyone in each state and territory, and it's the same thing time and time again. This is not a new issue. This has been happening. We look to the stolen generation. This is something that has happened right across the country, for decades, for a few hundred years. And rather than providing support, each state and territory has simply removed children at a faster rate than when the stolen generation occurred, and Kevin Rudd actually said sorry. Sorry means you don't do it again. We need we need families to be kept together.
Marianne,
this is really, really ridiculous.
Marianne, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate your time.
Yep, no worries. Thank you for having me.
And that's afternoon briefing for today. We're on iView. If you want to catch up with any part of the program, you just search afternoon briefing on iView and we will be there. Of course, we might have an election by the time you see us again tomorrow, so stay tuned for that and everything on the ABC News channel. Stay with us here too. Up next is Joe O'Brien. He joins you with today's other top stories too. I'll see you tomorrow.